Section 12 of Gray's Anatomy Part 4. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by M.L. Cohen. Anatomy of the Human Body Part 4 by Henry Gray. The midbrain. The midbrain, or mesencephalon. The midbrain, or mesencephalon, is the short, constricted portion which connects the pons and cerebellum with the thalamoencephalon and cerebral hemispheres. It is directed upward and forward and consists of 1. A ventrolateral portion composed of a pair of cylindrical bodies named the cerebral peduncles. 2. A dorsal portion consisting of 4 rounded eminences named the corpora quadrigemina. And 3. An intervening passage or tunnel, the cerebral aqueduct, which represents the original cavity of the midbrain and connects the third with the fourth ventricles. The cerebral peduncles, pedunculus cerebri, crus cerebri, are 2 cylindrical masses situated at the base of the brain and largely hidden by the temporal lobes of the cerebrum, which must be drawn aside or removed in order to expose them. They emerge from the upper surface of the pons, one on either side of the middle line, and, divergent as they pass upward and forward, disappear into the substance of the cerebral hemispheres. The depressed area between the crura is termed the interpeduncular fossa and consists of a layer of grayish substance, the posterior perforated substance, which is pierced by small apertures for the transmission of blood vessels. Its lower part lies on the ventral aspect of the medial portions of the tegmenta and contains a nucleus named the interpeduncular ganglion. Its upper part assists in forming the floor of the third ventricle. The ventral surface of each peduncle is crossed from the medial to the lateral side by the superior cerebellar and posterior cerebral arteries. Its lateral surface is in relation to the gyrus hippocampi of the cerebral hemisphere and is crossed from behind forward by the trochlear nerve. Close to the point of disappearance of the peduncle into the cerebral hemisphere, the optic tract winds forward around its ventrolateral surface. The medial surface of the peduncle forms a lateral boundary of the interpeduncular fossa and is marked by a longitudinal furrow, the oculomotor sulcus, from which the roots of the oculomotor nerve emerge. On the lateral surface of each peduncle, there is a second longitudinal furrow, termed the lateral sulcus. The fibers of the lateral lemniscus come to the surface in this sulcus and pass backward and upward to disappear under the inferior colliculus. Structure of the cerebral peduncles. On transverse section, each peduncle is seen to consist of a dorsal and a ventral part, separated by a deeply pigmented lamina of gray substance termed the substantia nigra. The dorsal part is named the tegmentum, the ventral the base or crustum. The 2 bases are separated from each other, but the tegmenta are joined in the median plane by a forward prolongation of the raphe of the pons. Laterally, the tegmenta are free. Dorsally, they blend with the corpora quadrigemina. The base, basis pedunculi, crusta or pes, is semilunar on transverse section and consists almost entirely of longitudinal bundles of efferent fibers, which arise from the cells of the cerebral cortex and are grouped into 3 principal sets, that is, cerebrospinal, frontopontine, and temporopontine. The cerebrospinal fibers, derived from the cells of the motor area of the cerebral cortex, occupy the middle 3/5 of the base. They are continued partly to the nuclei of the motor cranial nerves, but mainly into the pyramids of the medulla oblongata. The frontopontine fibers are situated in the medial 1/5 of the base. They arise from the cells of the frontal lobe and end in the nuclei of the pons. The temporopontine fibers are lateral to the cerebrospinal fibers. They originate in the temporal lobe and end in the nuclei pontis. The substantia nigra, intercalatum, is a layer of gray substance containing numerous deeply pigmented multipolar nerve cells. It is semilunar on transverse section, its concavity being directed towards the tegmentum. From its convexity, prolongations extend between the fibers of the base of the peduncle. Thicker medially than laterally, it reaches from the oculomotor sulcus to the lateral sulcus and extends from the upper surface of the pons to the subthalamic region. Its medial part is traversed by the fibers of the oculomotor nerve as these stream forward to reach the oculomotor sulcus. The connections of the cells of the substantia nigra have not been definitively established. It receives collaterals from the medial lemniscus and the pyramidal bundles. Bechtereau is of the opinion that the fibers from the motor area of the cerebral cortex form synapses with the cells whose axons pass to the motor nucleus of the trigeminal nerve and serve for the coordination of the muscles of mastication. The tegmentum is continuous below with the reticular formation of the pons and, like it, consists of longitudinal and transverse fibers together with a considerable amount of gray substance. The principal gray masses of the tegmentum are the red nucleus and the interpeduncular ganglion. Of its fibers, the chief longitudinal tracts are the superior peduncle, the medial longitudinal fasciculus, and the lemniscus. Gray substance. The red nucleus is situated in the anterior part of the tegmentum and is continued upward into the posterior part of the subthalamic regions. In sections at the level of the superior colliculus, it appears as a circular mass which is traversed by the fibers of the oculomotor nerve. It receives many terminals and collaterals from the superior cerebellar peduncle, also collaterals from the ventral longitudinal bundle, from Gudin's bundle, and the median lemniscus. The axons of its larger cells cross the middle line and are continued downward into the lateral funiculus of the medulla spinalis as the rubrospinal tract, those of its smaller cells and mainly in the thalamus. The rubrospinal tract forms an important part of the pathway from the cerebellum to the lower motor centers. The interpeduncular ganglion is a median collection of nerve cells situated in the ventral part of the tegmentum. The fibers of the fasciculus retroflexus of Meinert, which have their origin in the cells of the ganglion habenula, end in it. Besides the two nuclei I mentioned, there are small collections of cells which form the dorsal and ventral nuclei, and the central nucleus or nucleus of the raphe. White substance. 1. The origin and course of the superior peduncle have already been described. 2. The medial posterior longitudinal fasciculus is continuous below with the proper fasciculi of the anterior and lateral funiculi of the medulla spinalis. In the medulla oblongata and pons, it runs close to the middle line near the floor of the fourth ventricle. In the midbrain, it is situated on the ventral aspect of the cerebral aqueduct, below the nuclei of the oculomotor and trochlear nerves. Its connections are imperfectly known, but it consists largely of ascending and descending intersegmental or association fibers, which connect in the nuclei of the hindbrain and midbrain to each other. Many of the fibers arise in Dieter's nucleus, lateral vestibular nucleus, and divide into ascending and descending branches which send terminals and collaterals to the motor nuclei of the cranial and spinal nerves. Its spinal portion is located in the anterior funiculus and is known as the vestibulospinal fasciculus. Other fibers pass to the median longitudinal bundle from cells in the reticular formation of the medulla, pons, and midbrain, and also from certain large cells in the terminal nucleus of the trigeminal nerve. According to Edinger, it extends to the so-called nucleus of the posterior longitudinal bundle in the hypothalamic region. But this is uncertain, and the fibers above the nucleus of the oculomotor are smaller in diameter than the rest of the bundle. According to Held, fibers from the posterior commissure can be traced into the posterior longitudinal bundle, and according to the same author, many of the descending fibers arise in the superior colliculus, and, after decussating in the middle line, end in the motor nuclei of the pons and medulla oblongata. These fibers from the superior colliculus probably pass into the ventral longitudinal bundle. Fibers are said to pass through the medial longitudinal fasciculus from the nucleus of the abducent into the oculomotor nerve of the opposite side, and through this nerve to the rectus medialis oculi. Fraser, however, denies the existence of such fibers. Again, fibers are said to be prolonged through this fasciculus from the nucleus of the oculomotor nerve into the facial nerve, and are distributed to the albicularis oculi, the corrugator, and the frontalis. The ventral longitudinal bundle consists for the most part of the tectospinal fasciculus and arises from the superior colliculus. The fibers arch ventrally around the central gray matter and cross the midline in the fountain decussation of Meinert. They then descend in the tegmentum, part of them passing through the red nucleus ventral to the medial longitudinal bundle.